بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد أما بعد Alhamdulillah, I welcome all of you yet again to another Tafsir Halaqah, and we have been on a journey so far, alhamdulillah. We've been looking into the life of Imam Tabari, rahimahullah. We've discussed a very few things so far. We haven't looked at in the particulars about his life, but we have seen a broader overview of where he was born, when he was born, the places he's visited, and his journey of ilm during his life. So, inshallah, now we want to dig a bit more deeper. We have already talked about a few principles of learning and education as existed in the time of our Salaf al-Salihin, and something that we're trying to, inshallah, revive through this project. And in today's lesson, inshallah, and the forthcoming lessons, we'll be talking about some of those important principles, inshallah, as we progress. Bidnai ta'ala. So today's topic, as far as it concerns the life of Imam Tabari rahimahullah, is the principle of learning from cradle to grave. Okay, learning through your entire life, and from when you were born all the way to your deathbed. Subhanallah. And some people mentioned that some ulama mentioned that this journey of learning will continue in Jannah as well, but it will be a different kind of learning. It will not be for ibadah. It will not be for, it will be a different kind of learning. I mean, when you see Allah Azza wa Jal, you'll know for the first time, you'll learn for the first time how your Lord is, how your Rabbul Alameen is. And when you see Jannah, you will learn how Jannah is, because you'll be seeing it for the first time. So learning through observation and experience. You learn how things work over there, how things operate. So you're learning about the physics and the biology and botany of Jannah, subhanallah. And you'll be seeing things for the first time. So a lot of things that we have to learn. I could possibly argue that real learning based on actual realities, things that are beyond our humanly vision, that kind of learning will actually begin when we bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, with his mercy and tawfiq and rahmah and fadl, we enter, all of us inshallah, into his paradise, in Jannah, in Jannatul Firdaus, Allahumma ameen. Subhanallah. But as far as the dunya is concerned, and as far as ilm is ibadah in this world, the principle of seeking knowledge, right, it concerns a human being's entire life. It is not a matter of a few years. It's not a matter of a few years in nursery and a few years in secondary school or primary and secondary and then high school or sixth form, whatever the case may be, and then university, and then you're a graduate, and you have nothing to do with learning. You want nothing to do with learning after that, right? These educational models that we've developed, they're not essentially in line with how the Sahaba and the Salaf Salihin, they educated and they learned throughout our history. So inshallah, we want to explore and learn about those principles. Subhanallah. So Imam Tabari rahimahullah, as we've seen, that his life is an embodiment of this golden principle of Islamic learning. اطلب العلم من المهدي إلى اللحد. اطلب العلم من المهدي إلى اللحد. Seek knowledge from cradle to grave, to your grave. Seek knowledge from cradle to grave, subhanAllah. And it has components, and the first thing that it sort of begins with is your household. And we saw how important it is that a family is righteous and they're pious, because that piety, it transfers. It is contagious, so to speak, and it sort of transfers onto the children and the progeny of that family. Now, we've already mentioned and talked about that in detail. We want to move ahead. And we want to talk about this principle of continuing education with the same passion throughout your life. Inshallah, we'll talk about sub-principles in this, but this is the main topic of today's halaqah. And the main lesson I want us to take through this halaqah today is the fact behind true passion behind learning. It's supposed to cover a lifespan. It's not a journey that you end when your degree ends. SubhanAllah. So we saw with Imam Tabari rahimahullah, he was brought up in a very religious household. His father was his first teacher. He memorized the Quran. In the near, madaris, the masajid of his house, run by his family, and his father and his mother and all of his family supported him in that journey. And then he goes through all these years, you know, huge portions of his life are spent traveling and seeking knowledge. And we said that in all of that time, right, the first time he ever went back home was 20 years after he set off on his journey to seek knowledge from his house, hometown in Amul. And then he, subhanAllah, treads a path of tremendous courage and sacrifice for 20 years before he shows his face back to his family. And then he returns back for more, and then it's almost 60 odd years when he goes back to see his family one more time. And those are the only recorded events or incidents when he actually sees his family ever again. And we know that he didn't have a family of his own. He didn't get married, and he didn't have children, and so on and so forth. So a person like that, to have that kind of passion for ilm all his life, and the principle is, it's easy to learn when you are in a system, when someone is holding you, to the neck, and they're forcing you to write papers and give exams and this and that. And then of course, you have a motivation to be getting a degree at the end of it, a certification that could possibly earn you a career. But when you have none of that, no prospect of a degree, no prospect of an income at the end of education, would you still consider educating? Would you still consider yourself taking part in that kind of a strenuous, sacrificial journey? Right? Most people, I'd say, 99% of people would not. Right? And that's the problem that we're facing. And Imam Tabari rahimahullah, he lived that life. He is someone who, in terms of his ilm, in terms of his application, in terms of of conducting himself, he embodied that principle. And I want to mention a couple incidents towards the end of his life. So towards the end of his life, some of his students like Abu al-Qasim al-Hussein ibn Hubaysh al-Warraq, rahimahullah, and this is recorded in Mu'jam al-Udaba. Subhanallah, this kind of sacrifice and hard work and ambition, or a perpetual, continued form of sacrifice and hard work, we see like time and again in his Imam At-Tabari's life. In fact, we can argue that this passion, this zeal to subhanallah, acquire more and more and benefit and write and author more and more, it increased so much towards the end of his life that he had so many projects going on at the same time that he could not finish a huge number of them. But we have some of them, we have portions of it left, and we have references of it in different books, right? Imam Ibn Hajar would mention some things that have not survived onto this day, but we have references of those works. For example, the author of the publishers they mention over here in his life, they say that he continued with this passion and this zeal. In fact, it increased all the way till his deathbed at the age of 86, right? His ambitions did not die, did not burn out. His energies did not decrease. His pen did not dry, did not get dried, because he was writing consistently and he was authoring consistently. And he retained, subhanallah, that hope, that he wanted to, that he could still acquire, that he could still benefit others with his ilm. So he continued, subhanAllah. And this high goals of leaving a huge portion of literature as a service for the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, you know, until this age. 86 is an age in which you probably would even struggle to hold a pen straight. Your hands start shaking, you have all sorts of problems, diseases and illnesses, and in a time where life was difficult, you have this man, he's about to die, but his courage is unwilling to take that death pill. Allahu Akbar. His courage is refusing to die. His ambition is refusing to die out. His pen does not want to dry. His pen, wants to continue marching forth in this glorious and righteous battle of serving the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal against all falsehood and corruption. And so, subhanAllah, he starts on a journey in his old age, with many books, where he's writing about the virtues of the Khulafa, like the Ali, a separate book on Ali radiallahu an, on the virtue of Abu Bakr radiallahu an, a book on Umar radiallahu an, Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, and so many other books. And then he was writing small treatises, compiling, expansive works on usul al-fiqh, right? Then writing, al-muhadhabat, right, to sort of combine books on athar, narrations from Sahaba and Tabi'een, and putting it together in works which would sort of compile them in a more organized and authenticated manner, and so on and so forth. And subhanAllah, he wrote a huge treatise on usul. And in fact, some of the published names that we have, and inshallah we'll mention them in the forthcoming lectures, the name of some of his books that are published, and we know their names. We have huge books on on usul al-fiqh, and we also have huge volumes, like 4-volume works on just fiqh, for example. And then there's multiple levels that he's written on that. So he's written huge works, then he's summarized it, into smaller works, and so on and so forth, right? Then he's writing a book on, as I mentioned previously, al-qiyas. Al-qiyas is deductive analogy, comparative analogy. When you try and reason with nusus, you try and liken modern examples, modern issues, to examples in ethics and principles, axioms that we find in the Sharia, and try and reason from first principles to derive a ruling and issue, a fatwa, or a religious verdict or edict that would be helpful for the community. Now, as I mentioned, one of his students, he actually writes about this, is this venture of writing a book on al-qiyas. He says, كان قد التمس مني أبو جعفر أن أجمع له كتب الناس في القياس، فجمعت له نيفا وثلاثين كتبا وكتابا نيفا وثلاثين كتابا، فأقامت عنده مديدة، ثم كان من قطعه للحديث قبل موته بشهور ما كان فردها علي وفيها علامات له بحمرة قد علم عليها. Subhanallah. He says that Abu Ja'far, towards the end of his life, he requested from me that I gather all the books written by all the authors, and he's in Baghdad, the most well-resourced library in the world at the time, to give me all the books in Qiyas. So he said he requested all these books, so I jama'atu lahu. I got together for him close to 30 odd books on that subject, and these are principal books on just the topic of Qiyas. And these books stayed with him for a little while, only a little while, right? This is important. And then he is someone that he had sort of indulged himself very deeply into the ulum al-hadith towards the end of his life, towards just a few months before his life. He was mostly engaged with ulum al-hadith, right? Now he returns the books to him, and then Abu al-Qasim al-Hussein al-Warraq, he mentions that in all those works, right, he says fiha, all those books that I gave him, there were red markings that he had put in those books, meaning that he had read all of those works and he had written, thought deeply about it. and he had made conclusions, and he had his own thesis about things. But because he's, Allah alam, certain ulama, Allah Azza wa Jal sort of informs them that their end is near, and I can vouch and give you my eyewitness account of some of, not one, but some of my mashayikh who I've seen this with. They died, and the a few nights before they died, a couple nights before they died, they called their children, and they told them that, son, I'm going to be dying very soon, and I've just and this is a sheikh that I had lunch with, and we were joking, and he was completely healthy, and we walked almost 20 minutes from the madrasa to his house. He entertained me for food, and we had a lively discussion. He even got me some dessert, and on Friday morning, I hear that the sheikh has passed away. It was Wednesday evening that he had called his son to, give him his wasiyah. He said, I've written these things down. My time is near. I'm not going to live, right? For a long, much longer than the next few days. Like he said that, subhanAllah. And this is my wasiyah. This is my last advice and, bequest to all my children. And I still have pictures of those pages that he wrote in Urdu to his children, right? And you could see that this person is someone that Allah has informed him that his death is near. And we have other cases that I've seen myself, subhanAllah, and some mashayikh that had dreams of being martyred, and then we saw them, subhanAllah, being dying in assassinations, and subhanAllah, just because they spoke up for the integrity of the Sahaba, and so on and so forth. Allah alam, right, about these things. But how they, these are secrets of Allah Azza wa Jal. How this, some people, Allah Azza wa Jal, they're really close to him, they're awliya of Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah Azza wa Jal informs them of things. They can see beyond just the ordinary. So Imam Tabari rahimahullah, he perhaps is, and inshallah, we assume this wilayah for him as well. Someone like him, if he is not a wali of Allah Azza wa Jal, then who is? Truly and honestly, if Imam Tabari rahimahullah, people like him are not awliya Allah, then who is a wali in the true sense of the word, right? They're definitely not the Pir Sahibs and the Sufis who claim wilayah, but they have none of it, right? Their lives are filled with shirk and bid'ah, that a person of that nature will never be able to receive light, let alone receive wilayah. Wilayah is a huge stature. It's a stature, very, very close up to the level of the Siddiqeen. The Mulhameen, Umar radiallahu anhu was known as the Mulham of the Ummah, someone who was given these sort of insights by Allah Azza wa Jal directly. We have reports of him seeing scenes of the battlefield from hundreds of miles away, sitting in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, and seeing live scenes of how the battle took place and how the Muslims won, and he informed the Muslims about the victory, and then the Muslims who actually won, they came back to Medina, after a few weeks of journey, and they informed him about the victory, and the Sahaba already knew about the victory, subhanAllah, because Umar had told them. So Imam Al-Tabari rahimahullah, he goes through that, and he just dedicates himself towards the study of hadith towards the end of his life, and so he does not finish a lot of these works that he started. Subhanallah. Imam Al-Tabari rahimahullah, as is the right of education and learning upon you as a learner, that you give its due diligence towards it. Like you try and give your best when it comes to servicing this knowledge. Okay. And Imam Al-Tabari rahimahullah is definitely one of those people whom was deeply engaged with learning. And the author here, he mentions that the Sheikh would not just write, but like, all of his books are filled with deep thought and deep analysis of things, right? He has such a high drive and intellectual integrity that he would not just collect things. He was not just a collector, how you find people today normally. They're just collecting bits and pieces from books and copy pasting it, and then forming a new book and selling it as a product, right? Most of academic literature nowadays is exactly that, but not the ulama of the old. They would gather, as is the first stage of collecting, the grammar stage of things, as we've mentioned in our podcast webinar earlier the other day, and then he would sort of cleanse the arguments from what comments and ilm was worthy and what was not worthy of any attention. So he would do that, and then he would um, turn towards the statements of different scholars and certain principle, all the principles, and then he would lay them bare, and then dissect them and amputate arguments and words and conclusions, and then he would come up with, after such an enormous intellectual surgery of each of the works that he was doing, so, rahimahullah, he would come up with his own madhab, his own opinion, right? And he would proclaim the correct and the truth from that which was not correct, or at least the haqq that he thought was correct and that he had reached with his own ijtihad. Okay, so you can understand from this that ijtihad is a level that requires this level of dissection and surgery, intellectual surgery of texts. You really are engaged deeply, if you really want to get the most out of your learning and education, if you truly want to make a difference. Otherwise, people who just read and gather and all they are just parrots. They parrot information. They're not critical thinkers. They're not independent thinkers. They're not original thinkers. They're not visionaries with ilm. They have nothing to offer. All they have are just collected. Wikipedia can do that for you now. Google can do that for you, right? Um, yes, it's just quoting passages and quotes from your memory, or perhaps writing it down and then reading it up. Doesn't matter. If your level of ilm and if your um, attitude with ilm is all about collection of athar and statements and aqwal and this and that, and you have no deep thought about it, you have no analysis of things, then sorry to say, it's just like a donkey carrying books. That's all you've done with your mind. You've only engaged your mind in carrying books but you don't have any meaningful engagement with all that. It's just like how the Jews, are being described as donkeys with carrying ilm on their heads. Some kind of ilm is dependent on memory, just memory. But then if it remains as just a rote memorization without meaning, then it's blameworthy. It's blameworthy, right? People are called kuffar, but they're doing some of the most sinister and evil things, vile things, right, that you can ever imagine. These people are criminals, and they will be held accountable for their crimes, right? So ilm demands responsibility. طيب. Let's now talk about his productivity. Now, this Sheikh, Imam Tabari, towards the end of his life, as we have a record, he averaged 60,000 pages of work, like as an amalgamation, as a total, as sum total of all his work was close to 60,000 sheets of paper. I'm not saying pages, sorry, it's sheets of paper. And each sheet has two sides. That's 120,000 pages of writing that Imam Tabari is recorded to have done in his lifetime. We have with us preserved a few thousand of it, and of course, when you print things and you bring them into smaller prints, that size would perhaps go down by at least a half or more than a half. But then, like, for someone to have written at least 10,000 pages, like if someone could do that in a lifetime, that's a huge achievement, let alone write 60,000 pages, right? And Imam Tabari, he was doing this. Now, how did he do it? You see, when someone is an erudite alim, he's comprehensively educated and he has studied so much and he's mastered so much in his life, then and he has this lived this life of mastering everything that he's coming in contact with, and he's learning and teaching and benefiting others. So these are the three principles that we've talked about before: getting educated and nurtured from a good family, traveling and acquiring all every single last ounce of ilm, and then teaching it while you're studying. After this, you will understand that productivity after this level of mastery is essentially, a man who's that educated cannot work on one thing. He's not he's not a tunnel visioned man. So like he'll be thinking about like 20 different subjects because he has so much ilm, and he feels like he should be writing, right? And as he's reading, he's collecting information, he's collecting ilm. He said, okay, you know what? This actually concerns the life of Ali, for example. So I might as well just make a separate notepad for it, and I just start collecting information and maybe writing a thesis on it. So he just starts writing a book on it, right? Um, Writing, collecting, and all that. And he reads so one book can give you so many vistas to to think about, and then perhaps if you're like Imam Tabari, you would want to leave as much work as possible for the Ummah after you, right? So you would start writing. So this is another principle. Working on multiple projects at the same time is the byproduct of a comprehensive education, and a comprehensive education with mastery of most of those sciences that you have studied. So Imam Tabari was working on many things, right? Some of those things were tertiary endeavors, like works on qiyas and whatnot. Those are not the works that perhaps would have had the greatest effect on our ummah. But because you can find all of the usul, any of his final thesis in the works that we have preserved with us. And Allah Azza wa Jal, how He works in His hikmah, how subhanAllah, how amazing it is that He He preserves for His ummah the best, and the rest of the things are forgotten, right? So you work, you spread your, you let yourself be. You don't have to be tunnel visioned. Work, but then of course there'll be a time where you would dedicate certain, as we saw, Imam Tabari has all these projects going on, right? But then he has time blocks. He has focused times for different subjects. Okay, he started working for a few months on the spoken qiyas. He reads everything. He has everything in his mind, and then he wants to shift to hadith, right? So you're working a lot of things, but then you time block. You have deep work sessions and deep work months and periods, right? And as you're doing this, you're collecting with the mindset of writing as much as possible in as many fields as possible, because that's the for a lack of better word, that's the curse of knowledge, because you can't sit idle. Your mind would not let you live in peace if you are not giving what you've learned, right? So that's just a byproduct of so working on multiple things at the same time. And as you're reading, as tried to show you guys in the webinar as well, each page can take you into 1,000 different dimensions, right? And a person who's that dedicated towards ilm, he has nothing else to do. If he reads a paragraph and in that paragraph he comes across 10 different topics, he's going to, and he would start a separate file, a notepad for that, right? And as soon as he reaches the next page and there's something else relevant to that topic, he would mention that, right? So, and then at the end of the day they would have piles of sheets, and they would compile them into notepads, and then these would just become books later, right? um so this is a principle of learning that comes at a high stage. So you should be expanding your mind into multidisciplinary learning. Don't make yourself pigeonholed, parrot. Don't do that, right? There is a time and place for focused production of academic work, but what is more important, and as we've seen, subhanAllah, in us this century, most importantly, the most important breakthroughs, the most important things that actually matter are those which are multidisciplinary. They rely on so many different fields, right? And then the beauty of that is that it leads you to things which are out of the box, unimaginable things, things which you could not have imagined, right? Like the think about this biotechnology. Who could have thought about this? A human, I mean, we had, you know, fiction conceptions about human android, so part human, part machine, you know, Terminator movies and all that, right? Who could have thought, right? Who could have thought? But it came as a result of multidisciplinary learning. A lot of different people, a lot of different, you know, specialists um, working on different projects, different sciences coming together, right? But then there's always that person who is he's sort of connecting the dots between all of these things, right? And he's the person who makes the breakthroughs. And this is Imam Tabari, rahimahullah. This is how every alim should be in our days and time, right? So that's the principle number 4 that we've mentioned. And so dissecting books, intellectual surgery of books as you're reading, working on multiple projects at the same time, um, doing a multidisciplinary kind of an analysis of subjects, connecting the dots in in ways which no other has thought about. And then this last thing, something trivial, but it's very, very important, and that is the act of a a dialogue, or perhaps a wrestling, more important, more accurately, um, kind of a wrestling that you engage in with the book, with the author. You wrestle with the author, and wrestling is tough. It gets messy, and so should your book be messy. You should be owning the book that you have. Its pages should be flipped, right? It should be time stamped. It should be written on. It should be anyone who looks into that book, but they should be scared of that book. It should just look like someone has beaten the crap out of this, right? Just as you would see someone being beaten up in a wrestling match, right? A book should be like that. You would perhaps find that some of the pages start to turn and they sort of come out. That's what true reading actually is. Wrestling, writing, post-it notes, fatten up, and then you have other notes and diaries and journals on the side that you're writing, observations and new questions and you open, subhanAllah, so many different things. So I just love this phrase, intellectual surgery, because that's exactly, you're a surgeon. If you as an expert reader, expert learner, are a surgeon of the highest caliber, doing the most important surgery that can ever happen in this world, and that is dissecting knowledge, right? For the betterment of your own mind, and of course, as a result of that, the mind of others around you, inshallah. Okay, so that will be all for today, inshallah. We want to talk about the comprehensive education of Imam Tabari in the next session, inshallah. So if there's any questions, today we'll include our question and answer session within the recording as well, so that people who don't normally attend and have the chance to engage, perhaps we can allow them a chance to engage in this way. So if there's any questions, inshallah, if there's any questions, any principles, anything that comes to mind, inshallah, this is your chance to ask your questions, inshallah. I hope everyone sees how there's the bridge that we have between Islamic knowledge that we are trying to work on with this Tafsir Halaqah and the rest of the courses that we're trying to build, and how this sort of links in with the Tajdeed Seminary. All the same principles, is two strands of the same path, right? Same road, but there's two sides. The road collectively sort of leads you to that end uh, uh, destination of being, a scholar who is, inshallah, comprehensively educated and whatnot. right? So you can see, subhanAllah, all the same principles of learning that we were talking about in the webinar, right? Imam Tabari, rahimahullah, he's living by them, right? He's living by them. He does we saw the grammar stage of things. He always collects things first. Give me all the books, give me all the information. Let me make up, an educated understanding of what the subject is about. And then he starts to engage with it, critically to the logic stage. And then he comes along and openly proclaims his judgments, his madhab, his opinions, his conclusions and usul, and his declarations of what he thinks is the right, uh, you know, sort of correct opinion on things, right? His ijtihad, subhanallah. So and he's forceful with it, and you would, when you, inshallah, when in the next few sessions, inshallah, as we finish his life and we move to the actual tafsir of the Quran, you will see how Imam Tabari, his Arabic is beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful Arabic expressions I've personally read in my life. Imam Tabari's his language is beautiful, right? And that is that's an evidence of his that rhetoric stage kind of development as a person, as an alim, a master in expression and persuasion. Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Or inshallah, if there's no questions, we will call it a day here. May Allah bless all of you, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله على النبي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.